I usually arrive late to events, and it's okay for you to remain seated. It's great if you just smile and wave. That's how I prefer to be greeted. I'm not a gal who likes to shake a hand, give a hug or a fist bump. If you've done more than wave and say hello, my friend, you've done too much. When I sit down, I'll usually clear my throat, so people will notice I arrived at an instance. But they'll also assume I caught a cold, so they'll want to keep their distance. Sit down, where you're at. In the old days, people just tip their hats. Nowadays, people will greet with touching, and hey, that's simply much too much for me. The reason I show up late is so I can bypass any small talk. If I'm on my way and I'm making good time, I'll slow down when I walk. I like to slide in and sit in the back at any event to which you invite me. Then I can honestly say later, yeah, I showed up, and no one can accuse me of lying. Sit down, where you're at. In the old days, people just tip their hats. Nowadays, people will greet with touching, and hey, that's simply much too much for me. Look how much more animated if you're talking with me when I'm at home. And no, I don't mean that you're there too. It means we're both talking to each other on the phone. It's even better if my phone never rings, because we're talking to each other through messaging. It's even better if my phone never rings, because we're talking to each other through messaging. Sit down, where you're at. In the old days, people just tip their hats. Nowadays, people will greet with touching, and hey, that's simply much too much for me. Remain seated, remain seated, remain seated, remain seated, remain seated. Please don't you get up. Remain seated. Please don't get up. Thank you in advance for remaining seated.